Hey everybody, welcome to Off the Shelf Board Game Reviews. This is part of a video series detailing my top 51 tabletop games of all time. In this video we're going to cover numbers 30 all the way down to 21. So we're now starting to hit the top half of my top favorite board games and tabletop games of all time. Probably going to start including a couple surprises now, and you're going to see one new game added to the list, but that's enough for the wah stuff. Let's bring it all down to the table and cover number 30. Number 30 on the list is Railways of the World. Now, Railways of the World, if you want to listen to me do a little wah stuff just for a second here, is a really interesting game system for me because, believe it or not, I base a lot of my reviews off train games. Now, I know you're going, what, this guy's crazy. What the heck is he talking about? Listen to me just for a second. There are so darn many train games out there in this world. You have super light train games that can be family-friendly affairs, like Ticket to Ride. You have very I almost said soulless, but I know that's not the right word to use here. Let's just call them very mechanical and mathematical style train games out there that are just all about the math and figuring out the perfect moves every time. And then you have blends of all those extremes of the game, from the super duper light and fun to the super mathematical games such as Steam, games such as Brass. Games, if you want to add a little bit of fun, a little bit of strangeness to the games, you can even throw out there Australia. There is literally a train game for every kind of person, every kind of game style, and everything that you could ever want, multiple play counts and everything. And I can ramble on about train games for a long time, because basically, if you don't like train games, you don't have a soul. Okay, that was mean, but you know what I mean. I'm kidding around here just a little bit. Now, when it comes to reviewing games, every time I review every single game I ever review, I look at a whole bunch of criteria, and I kind of take everything as a sliding scale. Let's use a super duper extreme example here. Let's look at Munchkin. We all can agree that if Munchkin was a 10-minute game, it actually wouldn't be that bad. I mean, it's literally just to take that game, you're playing cards against the other players and having a little bit of fun. It's usually good for about 10 to 15 minutes. The reason why we all hate Munchkin is because we've all been part of that hour and a half or that 2-hour game of Munchkin where you literally are looking for any excuse, maybe even willing to fake a heart attack just to get away from that game so you can go on to something that's actually entertaining. So when I look at games, I'm looking at how long it takes to play the game, the amount of strategy involved in the game, the amount of players that can play the game, and I take everything as a gigantic sliding scale, and that's where I put a game to see if a game is worth it. I'm basically saying, is the amount of time you're investing in the game worth the amount of rewards for playing the game, and is the fun enjoyment just going to compound to make the perfect gameplay experience? Now, why have I said all this? Well, this is why I think Railways of the World is literally the best train game on the market. Because Railways of the World and the entire railway system does everything on that little sliding scale I just mentioned to make the perfect gaming environment. Railways of the World is not a game that'll ever hold your hand. That's a positive for me. I don't like games that hold the player's hand, allow you to play terribly, and still manage to come back and win the game. Let's look at Suburbia. It allows you to do that. Railways of the World also plays anywhere from 2 to 6 players. And you have a game that actually has multiple maps that are designed to play at multiple player counts. You have really good player maps that play anywhere from 2 to 3 players. Then you have the granddaddy maps that play up to 6 players. So you have a game that plays at multiple player counts. You have a game that has a lot of strategy built into it. I mean, this is a game that you're going to play multiple times thanks to all the maps, thanks to the slightly random setup every time you play the game with the cubes, the cards, the bearings you're going to start with, and all those different things that add just enough randomness to the game to make sure that the game plays differently every single time you play the game, but enough lack of randomness that you can actually play strategically. And this is a game that's going to be won by the best player, not by random luck, not by a catch-up mechanic, but it's going to be won by the best player who takes the board state of the game and plays the board state to the best of their abilities based on a little bit of randomness and making the best decisions with the money you have, the routes that are available at the beginning of the game, and you're trying to go out there and become the most financially successful person. Now, you can have other train games such as Steam, which takes the game ideas of Railways of the World and adds a couple more mechanics onto it, but it also extends the gameplay time. So like I said, you take all this as a sliding scale. You take the amount of time played and invested for the rewards of the game, the amount of players you can play with the game, the amount of strategy in the game, and you get what is, in my opinion, the absolute #1 train game on the market. This is my absolute favorite train game. Eagle Gryphon Games has done a fantastic job bringing a very high quality component game, multiple maps, multiple different ways to play this game, multiple different player counts. Matter of fact, if you had the entire Railway series, you're looking at a game system that you can play probably forever and never get bored of it just because the game is that darn good. Now, I enjoy train games. I have a heck of a lot of fun with train games. I think this is the best on the market, and this is a very easy number 30 for me on top 51 tabletop games of all time. Number 29 on the list is Fantastica from Eagle Gryphon Games and the fantastic designer Alf Seeger. Now, this game is one of those interesting games that I really cannot do it justice by trying to explain this game in under 5 minutes. But I can tell you that this is an extremely whimsical, extremely wonderful deck building game for up to 4 players. And in this game, it is like your typical deck building game where you're going out there and trying to purchase cards, add them to your deck. These cards are going to give you extra abilities. They're going to allow you to get more victory points. And the objective of the game is to score the most amount of victory points by accomplishing quests. And the first person to get a certain amount of quest victory point totals is going to be the winner of the game. On some rare, super rare circumstances, you may also manage to run out the entire creature deck. It very rarely happens. Most times, a game is going to come to an end by somebody completing the amount of quests required to win the game. So basically, the players are racing each other to complete quests before that deck runs out. First person to get the amount of victory points is going to be the grand winner of the game. Now, why this game is so wonderful and it deserves to be so high on my top games of all time list is because this game is full of whimsy, it's full of joy, and it creates such a wonderful environment that makes you feel like you're almost, I guess the best way to describe it is like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's just like going on a fantastic adventure. Pardon the pun based on the name, Fantastica. But it's like going on a fantastic journey. You walk into the wardrobe and you experience this wonderful journey that is Fantastica. The game is actually extremely easy to play. Every single player starts with their hand of cards. No, you're not going to have that many. That's for all the players in the game. And you're going to play cards out, and you're going to be capturing enemies around the board, and that's how you purchase your cards. You're not purchasing your cards because you're like, no, I want that card, nope, I want that card, nope, I want that card, nope, nope. You don't purchase cards. You have to conquer these cards. That's how you're going to get these cards, is by going out there and actually conquering every single one of these cards, and that's how you're going to add them to your deck. Now, you need to have cards in your hand that allows you to capture these cards, so you need to intelligently build your hand of cards so you have the power to go out there and capture these enemies, such as the troll, the spiders, the knights, the dragons, all these things. And these monsters are going to get more powerful as you go on. Helping you on this is the fact that you can hire magical beasts. You can go out there and get artifacts and all these things in your effort to complete all these quests. Now, I don't have all the cards out here because I'm just trying to give you a rough overview of how the game plays. But the game is going to go on until one person completes all the quests they need to do, and then they're going to win. This game is extremely wonderful. It has a whole bunch of expansions available for it that adds extra variety. There's a castle in the sky. There's extra special gems. Yes, there's gems and treasures and everything you get by playing this game. There's a special little animal that you get that's a dog, and everybody needs their dog to go on a fantastic magical journey. You're dogging up, you dig up extra treasures. There's just so much little bits of whimsy and joy and fantastic awesomeness in this game. This game, Fantastica, is number 29. It was 38 on my list before. It is slowly creeping up because this game is so wonderful, so fantastic, and just a wonderful joy to play. That's Fantastica. Number 28, and dropping from 17, is Tyrants of the Underdark. Now, Tyrants of the Underdark is a very interesting game that combines a deck building game with an area control game to create this really interesting experience that cements this as a very solid 28. In the game of Tyrants of the Underdark, every single player, like most of your deck building games, is going to start with a hand of cards. There's 2 different kinds of cards in the game. One is used for purchasing, and the other type of card is using for attacking. You're going to use these cards to either go out there and gain dominance on the board, which is going to give you victory points, or you can use your cards to purchase other cards that are going to give you extra powers, whether it's dominance, abilities to mess around with the other players, or just abilities to get victory points by locking cards into your command center. Well, it actually has a name, but if you've never read any of the books, it's not going to make much sense to you, because this is based on the R.A. Salvatore books, based on the Dark Elves, the Drow Elves, and you're basically in the Underdark, in Mental Baranzan, in the famous cities of the Underdark, trying to become the fearless, dark leader of your own household. Now, in this game adds a lot of really interesting mechanics, and I'm almost kind of disappointed to say this because this game had so much potential when it came out, but unfortunately was hampered by 2 things that kind of prevented this game, I think, from staying within the mindset of the board gamers when the game came out. The first thing that was against this game is that the game original price was just a little bit high when it first came out on the market. If I remember correctly, it retailed for about $80, which at that time seemed a little bit high for a deck builder, especially since most of your deck builders at that time were retailing about $50, and you can get them even cheaper if you found them online or something like that. The next thing that kind of hampered the game is the back of the cards were kind of boring. But that also dovetailed into the other problem, because the very first expansion for the game that added more into the game had card backs that did not match, which also frustrated gamers, because to play the game at that point with the expansion, you were forced to sleeve all your cards, because otherwise you know which cards were from the expansion, which weren't. And this is why that was really important. When you play this game, you have in the basic box 4 different factions to choose from. If you buy the expansion, you have a total of 6 different factions. Every single time you play the game, you're going to pick 2 of those 6 factions, and you're going to shuffle them together. Now, every one of those factions plays extremely differently in the way they interact with the game. You have the Dragon faction, you have the Dark Elf faction, you have the Demon faction, and then you have the Elemental faction. Every one of those decks is built around a certain kind of mechanics to help improve the way the game plays. Some of those decks are more about spies and interacting with the other players and messing around with the other players. Some of them are about outright purchasing other cards to get more victory points by buying the really expensive high victory point cards. Some of them are about just going out there and gaining dominance on the board by taking out the neutral factions or taking out the other players as you play. But the experience of the game was different every single time you played it, because not only are you going to have a different pool of cards every time you play it, you're also having the gameplay of how the board is going to be played every time you play the game. Because the game is designed that you can actually win both ways. You can win this game just by focusing on the board. You can win this game just by focusing on the cards, based on the cards that you pick in your gameplay. And that is kind of the really cool thing about the game. It's a game of where do you want to focus, how do you want to focus, and how do you want to play. It makes this extremely awesome gameplay experience. That's number 28, Tyrants of the Underdark. Number 27, and dropping from 25, is Lords of Waterdeep. This is a 2 to 6 player worker placement game when you're talking about the expansion Scoundrels of Skullport. And that's pretty much a mandatory expansion. If you buy Lords of Waterdeep, you got to have the expansion. It's what makes this game so darn awesome. Now, what is Lords of Waterdeep? Lords of Waterdeep is your pretty typical worker placement game set in the Forgotten Realms, which is the Dungeons and Dragons world. If you're not familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, Forgotten Realms is their world, and basically this is one of the big cities in the Forgotten Realms. In this game, every single player is one of the secret Lords of Waterdeep. Now, I'm not going to go into lore, but cool books, cool story, good game. Anyways, the objective of the game is you are trying to complete quests. Quests are going to give you victory points. How do you gain these quests? Well, it's a worker placement game, so you're going to send your agents out to these various locations, and like your average worker placement game, every single location can pretty much only have one worker on it. So it's basically first come, first serve every single round, so you have the tightness of the game of you're trying to get the resources before the other people do. Now, this game adds tons and tons of theme, and it also adds something else I really like, but I'll cover that in just a second. Now, the way the game adds lots of theme is your resources are actually adventurers. So you may send your agents out there to go to a location to get you some warriors that you may need to complete a quest, but you may also need some clerics to complete that quest, so you need to send your agents out there to get you a couple clerics. But that quest also requires a rogue, and then once you have that rogue, you're going to send out all those adventurers, and then you're going to complete a quest, and you're going to score the victory points for it. Now, all your completed quests, you're going to play face down without the other players knowing what they are, because you are one of the secret Lords of Waterdeep. And every one of these lords is going to get some extra victory points at the end of the game based on completing quests that fit within basically what they like to cover. Some of the lords like more of the skullduggery, some of them like more of the commerce. Well, every one of the lords likes their specialty, and the more quests you complete along your specialty, the extra victory points you're going to complete and get at the end of the game. But you don't want the other players to know. And not only that, some of the rewards for these quests, they may not give you as many victory points, but they're going to give you special abilities that allow you to become a little bit different in how you operate in the game, possibly get resources in a different way and interact with the other players, which is the other thing I really enjoy about this game, and that is the intrigue cards. Now, for me personally, I don't enjoy a lot of games where you don't have any agency at all versus the other players, because those games to me just feel like a grand race. And I really don't enjoy games that is pretty much just a race. First person to get there is generally the winner. Now, most of your worker placement games, that's pretty much the concept of a worker placement game. You got to get your worker to that space that you need before the other player does, and that's why player order is so important in these kinds of games. What Lords of Waterdeep has done is added intrigue cards which allow you to interact with other players. Now, some of these intrigue cards allow you to steal warriors, clerics, rogues, and wizards from other players. It allows you to force them to do quests that allows them to be locked down some of the resources, because these quests from the intrigue cards are never really worth it, but they're mandatory. You have to be complete on one they've been assigned to you. There's things that allow you to get bonus agents sometimes. There's things that allow you to actually build buildings in the city of Waterdeep that allow you to control them. And by controlling these, you're going to get resources when other players visit your buildings. So this game has a lot of interaction, and it's a worker placement that forces all the players around the table to interact with each other. And that's one of the things that makes it a solid number 28 on my top 51 tabletop games of all time. That's Lords of Waterdeep. Number 26, and moving up from number 30, is Hyperborea, a criminally underappreciated Euro, bag building, war, area control, civilization, gosh, it just covers about everything kind of game. Now, I'm not going to harp on why this game is criminally underappreciated. Okay, I'm going to harp on it just a little bit, but I am going to tell you what Hyperborea is. Hyperborea is basically a area control war game built on a map that is going to change every time you play the game. Now, this game map is going to change extremely much. These are all the extra tiles that aren't even going to be used in the sample of the game that I've set for 6 players. Basically, every time you play the game, you're going to have 6 of these tiles. You're going to have 1 of these tiles, and you're going to create your board. And yeah, there's going to be a fog of war. I just kind of flipped up some of them so you can see what some of the tiles will look like. And the idea of the game is every single player has an empire. Now, every one of these empires, you can play this game completely where every single empire is exactly the same, or you can play an asymmetric game where your empire gets 1 of 2 powers. You're going to pick one of those 2 powers, and that's the power you have for the entire game. Now, on your turn, you're going to have access to a certain amount of cubes. Generally, it's going to be 3 cubes, but there are technologies that can change it. Special abilities, random card draws, things that you may explore, tons of things that may change this up, but basically you're going to start with 3 cubes. Now, you're going to allocate these cubes to your technologies, to your basic technologies on your board, and those are going to judge the actions you get to do every single turn. So those actions can be exploring different lands and discovering what can be around you throughout the board. Those abilities can be used to attack other players. Those abilities can be used to defend yourself. Those abilities can be used to add extra units onto the board. Those abilities can be used to explore. You're going to attack the ancient enemies from the civilization, because this is a post-apocalyptic game after war. Everything blew up, and we're just going out there and finding the mutants and zombies that are protecting the wastelands. You can use your special abilities to do all these things, interact with the board. And the objective of the game is to win by completing a certain amount of objectives based on if you want to play the short, the medium, or the long game. So the objectives that you have in this game is you be the first person to get 5 technologies. You are the first person to get 12 victory point crystals, not just 12 victory points, but 12 of the victory point condition crystals. Or the final thing you do is you get to be the first person to get all of your armies out on the board. Now, in a short game, you pick 1 of those. In a medium game, you pick 2 of those. In a long game, you're going to pick 3 of those. Now, this game is an extremely awesome game. Matter of fact, I just played this game last weekend, and there are tons of strategies in this game, and this game is extremely strategic. It's not random. It's not luck. It is all about planning your cubes. It's all about knowing your cubes, and it's all about basically keeping a running total in your brain. Because at the start of the game, every single player starts with the exact 6 cubes plus 1 of your choice. So in the back of your mind, you go, okay, I have 1 cube of every single color plus 2 cubes of one specific color. That's my starting army, and I got to pick that cube. Now remember, every one of those cubes are going to be used for certain things. Red is for war, green is for movement, blue is for technologies, yellow is for victory points, blah, 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 blah. Not going to waste your time on this. But you are constantly, because you can never look in your bag to know what cubes are left. You can always feel like how many cubes are left, but you're never allowed to know what color cubes are left in the bag to draw. So you look on your board and you go, I know I have 2 green cubes. I haven't drawn any of my green cubes, so that means potentially I have some movement coming up. So how do I maneuver my armies so I am ready for some movement that's going to allow me to go to maybe a center hex that's going to give me some extra abilities, some extra victory points, maybe some movement on my sciences. Or you can sit there and go, I got all my attack power out. I see that the other player's encroaching on me. So how do I defend myself? Okay, if I can get some purple, that might allow me to get some defense. Okay, how many purples do I have? Okay, I know I purchased a purple. I know I have a basic purple, and there was another purple I got from one of the cubes, but that purple's out. So let's see, I have 5 cubes left in my bag. Chances of me driving those things are pretty good. That's the kind of strategy this game is. There is a lot of deep strategy to this game. Matter of fact, I'll argue that point because the last 5 times I play this game, I won every single time. And before you ask, yes, I play red. Every time I play any game, I always play red. And there are so many people who said negative things about this game who like to argue that the game was unbalanced about all the races. And they will scream into the night that one of the factions was completely unbalanced and ruined the game. That faction has never beaten me, ever. Matter of fact, I don't think that imbalance actually exists. I think that this game is actually extremely well designed. And if you know your faction, you know your cubes, you know how you're building your empire, you know how you're exploring, you know how all their players are playing around the board, even as an asymmetric game, I think this game is balanced extremely well. It is a phenomenal game. It is extremely underappreciated. And I think it's a game that every single person should play, knowing what the game is going into it. This is a bag building game, much like Orleans. It is an area control game. It's a little bit of a war game. It's a little bit of a Euro game. And it's a little bit of an exploration game. That is everything that makes Hyperborea. Number 25 and new to the list is Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, a 4X style game that is very much thematically associated with the classic PC game Warcraft from Blizzard. In this game, this is a 4X style game. Every single person controls one of the famous fantasy races. You have your orcs, you have your lizards, you have your goblins, you have your humans, you have your dwarves, you have your elves, blah, 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 blah. You have all these 8 different races you potentially take into the game. And your objective is you're trying to win the game by completing one of the 4X's, which ends the game but doesn't necessarily give you victory. You still have to have the most victory points, and you also can't be wiped out. If you're wiped out, while that may be one of the end game victory conditions, it doesn't matter how many victory points you have. If you're wiped out, you are automatically a loser. Now, what is a 4X game? Well, the 4X's are explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate, and you're trying to complete one of those 4X's to bring about the end game while having the most victory points in a fantasy themed game. Now, this game is really done a great job of creating a 4X game that actually plays pretty quickly. It does play from 1 to 8 players, and the 1-player game you can play solo versus an AI, or if you really want a good challenge, you can play versus multiple AIs, and your objective is just basically to have the most victory points. In a 1-player game, plays about an hour, while an 8-player game, if you want to bring out this special island, bring out the extra board, allows you to expand this into an 8-player game, then the game can go on for maybe about 3.5 to 4 hours. But luckily there's mechanics built into the game to help it play just a little bit quicker, so you actually can play the 8-player game in about 3.5 hours. Now the game has a whole bunch of extra stuff into it. You have mercenaries, you have spells, and basically you are going to send out your peons who are going to give you the resources so you can build up your army, so you get your flying ships, so you can get your water boats, so you can get your heroes out on the board, and you're trying to control your resources such as your minerals, your magical resources, your food, because you need your food to bring out your units. You're trying to build up your empire, increase the level of your castle, and there's extra components that you don't even see here, like the 3-dimensional towers, the 3-dimensional castles, and all these things that go to make this a really fantastic game. This game has done a fantastic job creating an asymmetric 4X style game with a nice, very cool fantasy theme that plays differently every time you play thanks to a random setup of the board. It has very good rules that keep it playing quickly and keep it playing very aggressively. And it's also a victory point game, so there's a ways to play the game multiple different ways without just going out there and trying to thump on your opponent. Now there's one little caveat I do want to add. We do have a house rule at my house. We have actually removed, or I should say kind of modified, one of the X's required to end the game. In the normal game, the only way to end the game through the exploration is by exploring all the land masses, and that brings about the end game. We feel that makes the game end a little bit too quickly and makes boats not as valuable as they could be. So we have one extra condition for the full exploration. You have to actually explore all the water spaces too. So yes, I am freely going to admit this game is number 25 with one minor house rule, but I don't think that house rule is enough to make this make any difference. And this is a fantastic number 25, new to my list. That's Heroes of Land, Sea, and Air. Or I'm sorry, Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, number 25. Number 24, and skyrocketing up the list from 37 on the last time I did this list, is the Manhattan Project. And in this case, I do have one of the expansions for the game. Now, the Manhattan Project is a worker placement game. It plays up to 5 players. And like my other favorite worker placement games, this is a worker placement game with a bite that allows you to have agency over what the other players are doing. Now, this is your typical worker placement game in the effect that every person has a certain amount of workers. In this game, you have different kind of workers doing different things. You can have your basic worker, you have your scientists, and they're going to be able to place on different locations on the worker placement board. But at the same time, you are also building up your base or your factory, whatever you want to call it, with different locations that you're going to purchase from the board. Now, every one of these locations is going to allow you to get different things, allow you to be much more efficient with your engine as you're trying to build up to get the amount of resources you need to build the bombs. And there's a certain amount of victory points you need to win the game. It's based amount of players, but we're not going to bore you with the little details. The thing that's really cool about this game, and the reason why I enjoy it so much, is this is a worker placement game where you have agency over the other players. Now in this game, every single person has a location where all their factories and everything are going to be located, and every single player has some fighters and every single player has bombers based on how you're building up your little factory and you're building up your empire here. And you can send your bombers out to attack other players' factories if they don't defend their factories with their own fighters. So now you have a worker placement game where you have certain kind of workers who do certain kind of things, and you have spies that you can send to the other players' factories to steal their resources, and you have the ability to go out there and literally take out your other opponent's factories. So if you have a player who has gotten very lucky, well, I shouldn't say lucky because there's not much luck in worker placement games, but if somebody's managed to build a really good engine that you weren't anticipating, but they didn't get defensive while they're building up that engine, you can send out your bombers and go ahead and blow up one of their factories. And then they're going to look and go, whoops, I guess I better rebuild that factory, which is going to set them behind. And that is what I enjoy about this game so much as a worker placement game. Yes, it seems cruel. Yes, it seems mean. But I really, really enjoy games that allows you to have agency over what other players are doing and forces you less to play the race game and more to play a game where you not only have to go out there and get the resources, you have to protect your resources. So it's not a race just to go, aha, I'm the first player, I got the spot before you. No, no, no. It's a race to be the first player and then to protect those resources so you don't lose them. I enjoy the Manhattan Project immensely. It's a really fantastic worker placement game with a lot of agency, a lot of interaction between all the players, and it plays all the way up to 5 players, and it has a very, very well done ability to match the theme of the game with different nations all working to build the biggest bomb. That's the Manhattan Project. Number 23, and jumping up from number 36, is Tragedy Looper. Tragedy Looper is a game that's basically an RPG almost in a box, mixed in with a mystery game, mixed in with, well, let's just call it Quantum Leap, if you remember the show from the 80s, mixed in with every single time travel idea, maybe thrown together to create an interesting game where it's one player who is the mastermind versus 3 other players who are trying to solve a mystery. Because this game, like Quantum Leap, if you're not familiar with the show, basically one person, or in this case 3 people for the game, are traveling back and forth through time, inhabiting other bodies, and trying to stop a mastermind from creating something that's going to change the timeline. So our heroes are occupying other bodies, trying to go across and prevent the mastermind from completing some kind of nefarious scheme that they're trying to work on. Here's the trick. The players don't know what the nefarious scheme happens to be. Only the mastermind, fitting the name, knows what's going on. So the players are going across, exploring different locations, interacting with other players or other NPCs on the board, and playing cards in a way and in an effort to change what's going to happen. If the players can piece together what's going on before the mastermind can complete their nefarious plan, the heroes are going to win. If they fail, we're going to reset everything back to square one, and the players are going to get another chance to see if they can figure out what is going on. Same scenario, but the players now get another chance using the knowledge they have from the prior failure to try to figure out what's going on. And based on the scenario, the players are going to get multiple attempts at doing this, trying to figure out, piece things together and find out, okay, why is the police officer always going to the school? Why is the teacher always walking away from the school? Why is there always a murder in the city? You're trying to piece together all of these schemes to figure out what is going on, and the players get their handbook, and their mastermind gets their handbook with the clues, and again, every single turn the players are simply playing cards, and then once all the cards are played, the mastermind is going to reveal what exactly has happened based on the playing of the cards. Now this game is extremely interesting. It is definitely a whodunit, murder mystery, deductive style game that comes with a lot of scenarios. And the very cool thing about this game is not only are there many scenarios that you can download online, but there's actually rules in the game that allow you to create scenarios as the mastermind. Just the basic game itself comes with 10 scenarios, and each one of the expansions adds more scenarios. And at this point, I would think it's easily safe to say there's got to be at least 50 scenarios available for this game, making sure that there's extreme amounts of replay value in this game. Now, there is one negative for the game, and that is most of the scenarios, once you complete them, once you know the trick, once you know the gimmick, and now once you know the crime, there's really no reason to replay the game with that specific scenario. But the ability for you to create extra scenarios is one of the things that allows this game to be in my top 51 games. Because while you may be able to go through all the scenarios and eventually finish all of them, you're still going to have to compete against the person who likes to play the mastermind, who's going to keep creating scenarios for all the players. It's not hard to create scenarios, and the scenarios are always fun and entertaining, creating this awesome whodunit style game that is really, really enjoyable for anybody who wants to put on their Sherlock Holmes cap, try to solve a mystery with a little time travel involved, and get to the bottom. That is Tragedy Looper. Number 22, and jumping up from 26, is Jenga. No, Jenga, really, Jenga. No, heck no. Number 22, jumping up from 26, is Dread, a one-shot RPG that allows horror, thematic, and excitement all to come together to create what should be in a horror RPG. Anticipation, stress, anxiety, and all the things come about when you play Dread because of the Jenga tower. Now, what is Dread? Dread is one-shot RPG. If you don't know what the concept of one-shot RPG is, a one-shot RPG is this game that you're going to basically play one time only. It's one adventure, one little incident, whatever you want to call it. Usually plays anywhere from 3 to 5 players. You get your friends together, you set up a scenario, however you want to do it. Basically, if it's a horror-based, if it's an action-based, whatever it happens to be, a future post-apocalyptic, whatever it needs to be, you're going to have a quick little overview. And the one shot is basically going to be started and finished in that one role-playing session. What Dread has done is it has allowed you to create the anticipation and anxiety that comes from Jenga, mixed with the anxiety of good horror-based storytelling to create the perfect environment that actually feels like a real horror-based game. Because when you play Dread, you don't use dice for any of the actions you are going to do in the game. Every time you announce you're going to do an action in the game, the reader or the storyteller or GM, DM, whatever you want to call it, it's the same person. Basically, the person running the game is going to look at you and say, pull. And they're going to tell you how many pulls you need to make from the Jenga tower. And now if it's an easy task, they may say, make 1 pull. If it's a medium task, they may tell you to make 2 pulls. Or if it's a really hard task, they may tell you to make 3 pulls. And after they tell you to make the pull, the player can decide that, no, I don't want to make the pull, and they're automatically going to fail. Or they can decide that they're going to make the pull, and basically it's going to be like playing a game of Jenga. If I was told to make 1 pull, I'd pull out once. If I was told to make 2 pulls, I would pull out twice. And if I was told to make 3 pulls, yep, you guessed it, I would have to make 3 pulls from the Jenga tower. Now this adds a little bit of anxiety because, as you know, if you play Jenga, as the tower starts getting higher and higher and higher, you start getting more and shaky, more anxious because you know the tower is going to fall. And in Dread, if the tower falls, your player character is going to die. That is the way you die in this game. If you need to make a pull from the tower and the whole tower falls, notice I kept that silent so I don't blow out the microphone, but if the tower falls, you don't die instantly, or you might die instantly depending on circumstances, but if the tower falls, you are the next person to die, which adds amazing amounts of anxiety, stress, and everything to create a wonderful horror story playing environment. Now, Dread has been around for a long time, and I actually suggest that you go through Drive-Thru RPG to pick up the game, because I think it's about the only ways you can find it these days. I haven't found a hardback version of it in a long, long time, and you can actually get through Drive-Thru RPG pretty inexpensively. It is a beyond phenomenal RPG. It's a one-shot. You can get your friends together, play it in one easy afternoon. It creates tons of excitement. It's great, especially since we're approaching Halloween. You take Dread, you set up the game, you turn the lights down a little bit, and start playing a little spooky background music and get a wonderful storyteller, and you're in for a wonderful gaming experience. That's Dread number 22. Number 21 on the list is Legendary Encounters, and while I have Legendary Encounters here, you can pretty much substitute any of the Legendary games based on the theme you like. There's Legendary X-Files, there's Legendary Predator, which I have over there. There's Legendary Big Trouble in Little China. There's probably a Legendary for every single classic movie or environment or theme that you've ever enjoyed. And if there isn't, well, there probably will be one day anyways. But the idea of the Legendary Encounter games, and again, this was number 23 on my list before, now it's number 21. But the idea of the Legendary games is that one of the themes or one of the movies, you're going to play through one of those movies, one of those themes, whatever it happens to be. So for the X-Files game, you're going to play, Legendary Encounters, the X-Files. You're going to play through an entire season of X-Files. In Legendary Encounters Alien, you're going to play through one of the Alien movies. In Legendary Encounter Predator, you're going to play through a Predator movie, blah, 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 blah. But the idea of this game is this is a deck building game with a little bit of a twist, because not only is the game designed extremely well to fit the theme. For example, in Alien, you are playing a deck building game where you're taking your team from the original movie, if you want to play for the first movie, and you're adding those cards to your hand in effort to defeat these aliens that are slowly going down a track. Every single round, at the start of every single player's turn, this track is going to continue going down. These aliens are slowly going to enter certain sections of the ship. If any of these aliens ever make it into the combat zone, they're going to start attacking the players. And if a player gets attacked, they're going to get a strike on them. If a player gets enough strikes, or even manages to get a facehugger put on them, their world is going to start getting very miserable. Especially if they get a facehugger, because if the facehugger goes in your deck and it comes back in your hand, guess what? Game over, man. Sorry, I had to throw that in there. But the idea of the game is you are trying to create a scenario by trying to go through objectives. Each one of the movies gives you 3 scenario objectives. If you complete all 3 of those objectives before all of our heroes are dead, you've completed and won the game, you've won the movie. If you fail to do so, if the Mother Queen or the hatchling or the ship falls apart or whatever happens to be with that specific scenario happens, all of our heroes are going to lose. Now, the cool thing about the game is, like most of these games, you're going to get your certain amount of buy power points every single round, and you're going to get your certain amount of attack power points every single round that allows you to attack these cards, take care of them, survive events, those are always extra fun, and also go out there and buy people who represent classic people from the original movies. For example, you may add Bishop in your hand, and then when you play Bishop, he's going to give you special effects. In this case, he gives you extra abilities and buy power. But the thing that you have to be very careful of is there's things that may cause these cards to die and be removed from your hand, or they can get removed from the headquarters based on all these alien cards, based on the theme of the game, and based on just how this game works. Now, I know I'm specifically talking about Alien, the specific legendary game right here, but all of these legendary games are extremely well designed. They all match the theme extremely well. Even Big Trouble in Little Chinatown, while it's kind of a goofy board game and a goofy movie, the game is fun. It matches this theme extremely well. Legendary Encounters X-Files allows you to play through an entire season of X-Files. It's really well designed, and you feel like you're playing through an X-Files season. Legendary Encounters Alien allows you to feel like you're playing through one of the 4 movies. And if you want to be really mean, one of the players can even take on the role of the alien, or you can even use the rules that allow you, once you become impregnated by a facehugger, you turn into one of the aliens, so you're not eliminated from the game. Or you can even buy the expansion, which allows you to play through 2 extra adventure scenarios that are more based on some of the books. If you've read any of the books, done really, really well. The Alien Encounter, the Legendary Encounters, all these games are extremely well designed. They're matching the theme extremely well. These are phenomenal games that are easily going to stay in my top 51 games of all time, because they're fun, thematic, enjoyable, challenging, and even when I beat them, I still want to come back and play them over again, because there is enough variety built in the game to make sure I never play exactly the same every single time. Sure, when I'm playing Alien, I'm trying to take out the alien, but the way it's going to happen, the way these cards are going to come out, and the way I'm going to interact with the environment is going to change every single time, making sure that while I may know some tricks to help me play better, I'm not guaranteed to win the game every time. That's number 21, Legendary Encounters. Specifically Alien, because it's one of my favorite movies, but all of them are really good. I hope you enjoyed this part of the video series covering numbers 30 to 21. Lots of surprises, lots of shuffling, and 1 new game on the list. Next up, we're going to have number 20 to number 11, where there's also going to be 1 brand new game and a little bit more shuffling. Maybe a little less surprises, but there are some interesting shufflings going on. Hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this video series. If you have any comments or questions, as always, go ahead and drop them in the YouTube comments down below. You can also feel free to email me off the shelf board game reviews. That is otsbgr@gmail.com. Also, click the notification bell down below so you can find out when the next video in the series is going to be uploaded. And as always, thanks for watching.